coming up in our newscast tonight. In the latest round of inter-Korean talks, North Korea suggests sending a cheering squad of 230 people. The two sides also discuss forming a joint ice hockey team and entering the opening ceremony under one unified flag. As the moment of truth inches closer for South Korean Winter Olympians, President Moon Jae-in visits them in training to talk with the athletes and provide personal encouragement. In Vancouver, 20 nations, including the U.S. and Japan, which held separate meetings on the sides, issued a joint statement vowing to support peaceful inter-Korean exchanges while calling for tougher unilateral sanctions to keep the regime in check. News Center begins now. It's 8 p.m. here in Korea, coming to you live from our studio in Seoul. This is Arirang News Center. I'm Daniel Che. Welcome to our program. Let's get things started with the latest round of inter-Korean talks, working-level dialogue on the upcoming Winter Olympics to be exact. They're expected to work out the size of the visiting North Korean delegation. We connect to our Lee Myung-bak at Seoul's Unification Ministry right now. Myung-bak, what's been agreed on so far?
Good evening, Daniel. The evening session is still ongoing at the House of Peace on the southern side of Panmunjom. During the morning session, North Korea said it will send a special cheering squad of 230 people and would like them to use the train to get into South Korea. Now, this is raising hopes that it will be a reopening of inter-Korean road links for the first time in 2 years. Now, we presume the talks are now in the final stages, and other issues such as the possibility of entering the opening ceremony as one team, forming a joint Korean ice hockey team, and expenses are being discussed. Let's take a look at what the heads of the South and North delegations said during the morning session.
We hope the North's participation in the Pyeongchang Winter Olympics and Paralympics will foster an Olympic of peace and hopefully be a chance to improve inter-Korean relations by bringing peace to the Korean peninsula.
Ties between the North and South in reality have been frozen and were in a state of confrontation since 2008. I believe it is the Korean people's will that relations return to normality.
The South delegation today is being led by Vice Minister Chon Il-sung, and the North 3-member delegation is led by the Vice Chairman of North Korea's Committee for Inter-Korean Affairs, Chun Jong-soo. The South Korean government is reviewing how to transport and accommodate the North participants so that it doesn't violate the multi-layered sanctions on North Korea. Seoul has agreed to provide necessary support for the North delegation while they stay in Pyeongchang. The two Koreas plan to discuss today's results with the International Olympic Committee on Saturday in Lausanne, Switzerland.
Well, not surprisingly, Myung-bak, the possibility of a joint ice hockey squad is drawing some strong responses that perhaps it's too late and it could mean a great deal of sacrifice for some.
You're absolutely right, Daniel. The two sides are currently discussing the possibility of forming a joint women's ice hockey team after South Korea made the proposal during last week's high-level talks. But there have been concerns that this would be unfair for South Korean players who'd get less time on the ice and that it would be a very disruption or a weakness to the team since North Korean players aren't at the same level as the South Koreans. Now, the South Korea's head coach even said she only heard about Seoul's push for a single Korean ice hockey team a couple of days ago from her staff and journalists, not from a government official. Adding to the controversy, a South Korean ice hockey fan has filed a petition at the National Human Rights Commission against Sports Minister Do Jong-hwan, who first brought up the idea. The fan said the government is robbing South Korean players of a once-in-a-lifetime opportunity to play in the Olympics. However, the minister has said that bringing in new players won't hurt the South Korean players because hockey involves a lot of substitutions and every player will get their turn on the ice. Back to you, Daniel.
Well, thank you for those updates, Myung-bak. We appreciate it. The joint ice hockey team is, of course, still a subject of discussions between the two Koreas, but marching in together under the same flag during the Global Games opening and closing ceremonies seems highly probable. Lee Ji-won helps paint a clearer picture of what that would look like while pointing out the potential hurdles standing in the way.
The first time South and North Korea marched into a sporting event together was at the 2000 Sydney Olympics, and since then they've done it 8 more times, the most recent being the 2007 Southeast Asian Games in China. Under the name Korea, athletes from the two sides marched in, holding the unification flag. Their entrance music was the much-loved traditional folk song Arirang. And while countries usually have one flag bearer, the unified team Korea has always had 2 flag bearers, one from each side, a male and a female, with the genders alternating at each event. For the opening ceremony in Pyeongchang, it'll be a male athlete from the south and a female athlete from the north. These are the same conditions as when South and North entered together at events here in South Korea, namely the 2002 Busan Asian Games and 2003 Summer Universiade in Daegu. But some experts say that while the two sides might come in together this time too, they'll do so each holding their own flag.
This Olympics holds a great deal of meaning to South Koreans since we failed numerous times before finally getting to host the Winter Games. But to not see the national flag of the host country could be quite disappointing to many. Also, the international community's perception of North Korea has changed very much compared to 10 years ago due to Pyongyang's aggressive nuclear development, so it's something to be discussed.
The uniform for the athletes at the opening and closing ceremonies is also something to keep an eye on. The uniforms for some 100 South Korean athletes and dignitaries have already been made, and they feature the South Korean flag taegukgi. But some experts say they might need a slight change if the two Koreas are going to walk in together.
Previously, at the 2006 Turin Winter Olympics, North Korean athletes wore uniforms for the ceremony proposed by South Korea, which did not have much written on them. But it might not be so simple with the design we have now. But then again, if the North Koreans do wear this uniform, I think the taegukgi stitched on the left side of the chest will be covered with the unification flag.
With Seoul and Pyongyang marching in together at a global sporting event for the first time in 11 years, there are a lot of details to be discussed. But experts say it'll be a great opportunity to promote Pyeongchang 2018 as a Peace Olympics and show the world the need for peace in the Korean Peninsula. Lee Ji-won, Arirang News.
President Moon Jae-in paid a visit to the National Training Center to show his support for the local Olympians. There, he asked for the athletes' support in making the upcoming Global Games a peace games. Our chief Cheongwon correspondent Moon Gun-young files us this report.
South Korea's national ice hockey team's pre-game chant highlighting teamwork. President Moon Jae-in visited the National Training Center in Incheon, roughly 100 kilometers south of Seoul, where the nation's Olympic squad has been working day and night, vying for the podium at the Winter Olympic Games in Pyeongchang, now just a little over 3 weeks away. One of the first athletes the South Korean president went to throw support were the ice hockey players, amid ongoing talks between South and North Korea of fielding a joint women's hockey team at the Pyeongchang Olympics.
앞으로 실현될지 안 될지 잘 모르겠지만 또 이제 북한이 올림픽 참가를 하면서 또 아이스하키 팀의 단일팀까지 이제 논의가 되고 있는데 그 성사 여부를 떠나서 그런 것이 우리 아이스하키 팀에 보다 많은 국민들의 관심을 쏟게 만드는 그래서 비인기 종목의 서러움을 희석할 수 있는 그런 좋은 계기가 될 수 있지 않을까 생각해요.
A joint team at the Games would require IOC approval, but if realized, it will be the Korea's first unified Olympic team, leaving a major mark in sports diplomacy that often mirror rocky inter-Korean ties. Nonetheless, there's been worries in South Korea that adding new players at a time when the Olympics are less than a month away would eventually weaken the team power and deprive South Korean players of due playing time. But ahead of having lunch with the nation's Olympic squad at the training center cafeteria, President Moon again labeled this year's Winter Olympics the Peace Games.
함께 공동 입장을 하거나 또 단일팀을 만들 수 있다면 북한이 단순히 참가하는 것 이상으로 남북 관계를 발전시켜 나가는 훨씬 더 좋은 그런 단초가 되지 않을까 기대합니다.
At this point, it definitely seems that diplomatic acrobatics have paved the way for North Korea to send a national delegation to the south next month to the Olympics. Whether this is only a momentary cooling period or a longer-lasting ratcheting down of tensions in the peninsula, only time will tell. But what's for sure is that it's in the hands of President Moon to now translate this opening of a temporary channel for dialogue with the North Korean regime into a window for nuclear dialogue, not only between the two Koreas, but between the U.S. and North Korea. Moon Gonyo, Arirang News, The Blue House.
Despite recent displays of goodwill by North Korea, the rest of the international community is staying firm that there won't be any let-up in sanctions until the regime gives up its nukes. According to our Kim Hye-sung, the foreign ministers gathered in Vancouver issued a statement to that effect, though they do support the two Koreas' decision to talk.
Sanctions and pressure will remain in place until North Korea gives up its nuclear weapons. That's what top diplomats from 20 countries said at the Vancouver summit on Tuesday local time. In a joint statement, 20 nations vowed to support the inter-Korean talks in the hope of a sustained easing of tensions. But the statement also called on individual nations to impose tougher unilateral sanctions that go beyond UN Security Council resolutions to pressure the North. In particular, the nations at the meeting pledged to improve maritime interdiction operations and stop illicit ship-to-ship transfers to block trade with North Korea. South Korea's Foreign Minister Kang expressed hope that the momentum for engagement with the North will go beyond the Winter Olympics while emphasizing that sanctions should be applied more rigorously. While repeating the sentiment that diplomacy is the best option, U.S. Secretary of State Rex Tillerson warned that the world will not accept North Korea as a nuclear state and rejected a freeze in South Korea-U.S. military drills in exchange for a pause in the North's weapons development program.
North Koreans know our channels are open and they know where to find us. But a sustained cessation of North Korea's threatening behavior is necessary. Our nations must remain united on sustaining pressure until North Korea takes concrete steps toward and ultimately reaches denuclearization.
While the nations warned about the growing threat of North Korea's nuclear weapons and the need for tougher sanctions, they also welcomed the turnaround in inter-Korean ties, expressing hope that diplomatic efforts can help achieve a peaceful denuclearization of the Korean peninsula. Kim Hye-sung, Arirang News.
As with many similar international gatherings, the Vancouver summit provided an opportunity to hold more up-close sideline meetings. Seoul's foreign minister met up with her counterparts from the U.S., Japan, and the U.K., reaffirming relations as well as joint efforts in tackling North Korea issues. Kwon Jang-ho has the details from those sit-downs.
The top diplomats of South Korea, the US and Japan, the three closest partners in tackling the North Korean nuclear situation, met separately after the conclusion of the Vancouver summit on Tuesday. According to Seoul's foreign ministry, the three hailed the summit as a success, commenting especially on its timeliness as the two Koreas reopened dialogue. They agreed that they must use the momentum from these talks to try and bring North Korea towards negotiations to denuclearize. However, all three also agreed on the need for sanctions alongside dialogue and pledged to continue to tackle the North Korean nuclear issue through peaceful means. South Korea's Foreign Minister Kang met with US Secretary of State Rex Tillerson separately, where they further discussed Seoul's ongoing talks with Pyongyang and how they can coordinate the international community's efforts to lead the regime towards denuclearization. They also arranged details on Vice President Mike Pence's trip to the Pyeongchang Winter Olympics next month. A separate breakfast meeting was held earlier between the South Korean and Japanese diplomats. Bilateral relations between the two countries had soured in recent weeks after Seoul's decision to denounce the 2015 joint agreement on the issue of Japan's wartime sexual enslavement of Korean women. But according to the Foreign Ministry, the meeting saw only an exchange of their government's positions, with Kang reiterating that Seoul does not consider the deal a resolution of the issue, and Kwon reiterating that Tokyo cannot accept Seoul's stance. However, speaking to the press later, Kang said she hoped that progress can be made given more time, and that for now, Tokyo is willing to take a two-track approach, separating historical disputes from other policies. The possibility of Prime Minister Shinzo Abe attending the 2018 Pyeongchang Winter Olympics was also said to have been discussed, but Kono said Tokyo is still reviewing his parliamentary schedule. Kang also met with British Foreign Secretary Boris Johnson. She thanked the UK for its constructive contribution in helping deal with North Korea, and Johnson expressed the UK's support for the inter-Korean talks. They also agreed to continue their close trade and investment relationship after Brexit. Kwon Jang-ho, Arirang News.
Many local firms have been hit hard by the government's decision to increase minimum wage, which is why the nation's top economic policymakers are gearing up to provide much-needed support to small and mid-sized businesses. Kim Mo-yeon zooms in on the response measures.
Korea's finance ministry says the government is preparing additional measures to support small and medium-sized businesses. Speaking at an economic ministerial level meeting on Wednesday, Finance Minister Kim Dong-yeon said the measures to be unveiled soon will include cutting credit card commission fees as well as rental fees in shopping districts to lessen the burden of firms affected by the sharp hike in the minimum wage. Last July, the Moon Jae-in administration announced its decision to raise the minimum wage by a whopping 16% to around $6.6, the biggest increase in 2 decades. The finance minister said that one of the government's top priorities this year is to successfully settle the minimum wage and create stable working conditions for firms by easing their financial burden as well. During the meeting, Kim confirmed that the government will launch a $2.5 billion investment fund to foster innovative startups and venture firms this year. This will be the first step of implementing its proposal to invest 10 trillion won or $9.4 billion by 2020. Minister Kim, together with the Minister of Science and ICT Yoo Young-min and the Second Vice Minister of Culture, Sports and Tourism Roh Tae-gang, also discussed preparations for the Pyeongchang Winter Olympics set for next month and vowed to cooperate further to make the most of the event. Kim Mo-yeon, Arirang News.
The price of virtual currencies plunged following more tough talk from Korea's finance chief. On Wednesday, Bitcoin dipped below $10,000. On Coinbase, a major exchange, it fell by 28%, but did rise back above the 10,000 mark by 7 a.m. local time. The price of Bitcoin in U.S. dollar terms is now around half of what it was in December. Back then, it topped $19,800. Other major cryptocurrencies also saw a sell-off, many of them falling much more than Bitcoin, which they broadly tend to follow. Passengers using the nation's main gateway will have to check their tickets carefully from Thursday on. As Incheon International Airport's new passenger terminal begins its commercial operation, several airlines, including Korean Air, have relocated to T2. Here's Cha Sang-mi with the updates.
Korea's main gateway, Incheon Airport, is opening its new passenger terminal on Thursday. Incheon International Airport Corporation and the Transport Ministry have advised airlines to mark the boarding terminal in red on passengers' e-tickets to help avoid confusion. Terminal 2 will host 4 SkyTeam airlines, Korean Air, Delta, Air France, and KLM. And Terminal 1 will operate 86 other carriers, including Asiana Airlines, T-Way, and EasterJet. The separation of operating airlines is designed to consider the terminal's capacity, boarding convenience, and operating efficiency. Directions to the airport have also changed. When driving, the roads separate at the airport entrance junction, but both terminals can be approached from the airport Newtown junction as well. And in case passengers arrive at the wrong terminal, there are shuttle buses and trains that connect the 2 terminals. But passengers need to take into account the time required to travel between terminals, as the shuttle bus takes 15 minutes from Terminal 1 to Terminal 2 and 18 minutes going the other way. The airport railroad takes just 6 minutes, but the train only runs every 12 minutes. The new terminal is easy to reach using public transportation, as the airport limousine buses, airport railroad, and KTX have all extended their operation to Terminal 2. The new terminal has all-inclusive transportation center with trains, buses, and short-term parking. Airport guides and employees will be available to help passengers reach the right terminal. The first flight is an early morning flight from Manila. Cha Sang-mi, Arirang News.
Former President Lee Myung-bak expressed his views on the ongoing investigation by prosecution into allegations of bribery. In a press briefing at his office in Seoul, he read a statement saying the probe is part of political revenge by the current administration. Stressing that his former aides were patriots who worked for the country, the ex-president claimed the prosecution is targeting him. As such, he should be questioned, not his aides. He added he is responsible for whatever happened during his term, but did not receive questions from the press. His former aide is under arrest for accepting a bribe from then-chief of the nation's intel agency, who is also arrested. The former conservative leader is accused of owning an auto parts company and using it to stash illicit funds. The Korean government vowed to take all-out efforts to tackle the fine dust crisis in the country. Speaking at a parliamentary briefing on Wednesday, Environment Minister Lee Myung-bak apologized for the mounting public concern over the issue. She added, as much of the particulate matter originates from China, Seoul will coordinate more closely with Beijing in research and sharing technologies to help reduce the levels. The capital, Gyeonggi-do and Gangwon-do provinces will be subject to bad air quality throughout the day, with fine dust levels hovering between 80 to 100 micrograms per cubic meter, exceeding the average 50 micrograms of density. Once again this year, commuters in Seoul could use public transport free of charge at peak hours. But following the first trial run on Monday, there were mixed responses to the effectiveness of these measures. Lee Jung-yeon took a closer look.
The emergency fine dust measures have once again been implemented in Seoul on Wednesday. These measures come into effect when 2 or more consecutive days have fine dust levels exceeding 50 micrograms per cubic meter. Public transport fees are waived during peak hours, and an alternating driving rule, which recommends cars with odd and even-numbered license plates take turns on the road, is implemented. The current fine dust level in Seoul is now in the severe category on the air quality scale, as it is above 100, way beyond 50. That is the standard for implementing these emergency fine dust measures. On Monday, there was a 1.8% decrease in traffic entering Seoul compared to the previous Monday, and there was a mere 2.1% increase in the number of subway users and 0.4% increase in bus users. This led many to question the effectiveness of the measures.
I don't know if it's worth the money to offer free public transport. I think they should rather offer free fine dust masks.
I think some people would rather drive their own cars than save a few bucks on public transport because they'd spend less time walking outside.
At this time of the year, the northwesterly winds from China often bring heavy dust into the city, so experts point out the very temporary and local nature of these measures. Moreover, a more long-term solution would involve controlling the total amount rather than the size of dust particles.
They only cared about the regulation on the bigger size particle. It means that all the smaller particles can just be emitted without any problem. So now government just started to put some kind of stringent regulation on those, total quantity-based emission control.
He added that these measures are more cost-effective and realistic than offering free public transport, which cost the Seoul government almost 5 billion won, or $5 million on Monday. Lee Jung-yeon, Arirang News.
Time to turn to Michelle Bak at the Weather Center for the updates you need. Michelle, the air quality, unfortunately, it's not getting better anytime soon. In fact, quite the opposite, I hear.
Yes, Daniel, the west central region was polluted all day today, and it will remain bad through the evening. Now, tomorrow, the southern regions that remained clean today expects to take a turn for the worse, in addition to the yellow dust and smog from China tomorrow. And temperature-wise, though, it will remain mild and comfy. So we'll start the morning at 0 degrees Celsius, and Daegu and Busan slightly warmer at 1 and 4 degrees Celsius. And into the day, even with the clear skies, it will look hazy due to the concentrated dust in the air. And Seoul will rise up to 5 degrees Celsius, while Gwangju and Busan peaks up to 9 and 12 degrees. The rest of the week will stay nice and warm, and starting Friday, the morning lows will fall back into the seasonal average again, which the way is supposed to be anyway. I'll leave you with the weather conditions around the world.
That's all we have for you on tonight's edition of Arirang News Center. Wherever you may be tuning in from, thank you for watching.